I think the only time you can make the spirit of the game argument is like, let's say there's another okay, let's say Monster Hunter Wilds 2 comes out. Like, what would it be called? I don't know, Monster Hunter Pacific. Let's say there's a Monster Hunter game where it's entirely based around the ocean and like Polynesian culture, and all the monsters are based like kind of around the sea, like sea creatures, right? And in this game, Monster Hunter Pacific, this is the first Monster Hunter game where you can see the health bar of each monster, like without a mod. You just load the game, every monster you fight, you see the health bar. Then sure, like you might say, like it would be reasonable to say, hey, I think this direction goes against the spirit of Monster Hunter, especially considering every single Monster Hunter game, we're never able to see the health bar. So I think in those cases, you can make the argument. But for the sake of like an actual challenge that's designed to change how you play, it's like, yeah, no shit, it goes against the spirit of the game. I'd say play the old games before running your mouth. PS2 era, we had no flashy. Yeah, no, I played all of the games. I started with Freedom. Freedom was my first game. I played all of them. Monster Hunter spirit of the game, slay big monsters, true. Hunters nowadays are soft, not knowing the real struggle of running out of... Yeah, true. Yeah, no, trust me, I've been there. The only earlier game I could have played was the PS2 one. It was either PS2, which I didn't play, but then Freedom, which is based on the PS2 version. So that's like the second oldest game that I could have started with. Nah, that's not an argument. Show me the spirit and I'll think about it. But you can't prove you shouldn't go against it. I agree with you by saying that. Okay, I think when people say it goes against the spirit of the game, they're not saying the developer. I guess they're kind of saying the developer shouldn't do this. But obviously it doesn't mean that the developer can't do it. And there is always a chance that going against the spirit of the game could make the game better. Like, it's always possible. But I think the actual sentiment behind, like in the example that I gave, I think the sentiment is reasonable, right? Like, wouldn't you agree? Like, if you have 10 games, or let's say like, well, even more than that, right? 10 games plus, where each game you cannot see the monster's health bar, and then in the 11th game you can see the monster's health bar, I think it's quite reasonable to be like, this direction kind of goes against everything that this game has set up beforehand. It doesn't mean that the developer can't do it, but it's definitely a like, does that make sense? Smash Bros is a competitive game. It wasn't supposed to be, true. But I think that's a bit different though. That's a lot more loose. Like the entire game of Smash being played in the way that it was, to the point where it opened up an entire competitive community, that's kind of different than just like one mechanic that is now being added to the game. I started with the PS2, swinging your weapon with the right joystick while trying to move your camera with the arrow keys. Yep. Mate, I did the claw. Did you do the claw on the PSP? I was a master of the claw. Pressing L1 to look for items, deflecting after doing anything with your items, actually being more dangerous than velocipede attacking. True. And like, I don't know if you were here, like guys, or when I brought this up before, but like I do acknowledge that something going against the spirit of the game is not always bad. Like, it may turn out to be good, but I think the fear of something going against the spirit of the game is an understandable fear. For example, like, I think that, like, you remember when World first came out, or they were showing the trailers for when we first started seeing gameplay of World, and we were introduced to damage numbers, right? I think I had this conversation before, but I don't know if you were here. I was one of the people saying, damage numbers in Monster Hunter, excuse me, no thank you. I was adamant, because every single game prior, we didn't have damage numbers. The whole point is that you feel out your damage based on how often the monster flinches, or how quickly you break parts, or even the sound effect and the blood spray. Like you would learn how much damage you're dealing by feeling. And I felt like that was such an integral, that's one of the things that separated Monster Hunter from other third-person action games. So I was fully in the camp of damage numbers, no thank you. But now it's in the game. And to be honest, personally, I kind of don't want to go back. I don't want there to be, I know you can turn the damage numbers off, but I think I'm happy with there being damage numbers now, you know. But I use that as an example to say that was a thing that I felt went against the spirit of the game, but now I think it's part of the game. But the health bar example, I think if they introduce health bars, I could end up being wrong again, but I have an even stronger feeling that health bars would super go against the spirit of the game. But who knows, you know? That's a strange black swan argument to me. I see all white swans. No, I see a black one. Let's kill it because there shouldn't be any black swans. Is that, what's that in response to? Is that in response to... Oh, in response to the smash thing that I said? That's a strange black swan argument. I see all white swans. My brain is not moving fast enough to catch what you're saying. You might have to forgive me and dumb it down for me just a little bit. There's a house with a sentence on the wall painted on it by the owner. Everything we learn is scary in the beginning. Sometimes you get used to it. Sometimes you have to get used to something before able to see its benefit. Yeah, of course, yeah, I agree. Like that fits exactly with the damage numbers thing, you know. But I'm just saying that the sentiment comes from somewhere. Like in my health bar example, the sentiment that I would feel, or that a lot of Monster Hunter players may feel, behind, hey, damage, health bars, wait, what? I think that the sentiment comes from somewhere, and the sentiment is understandable and reasonable. That's all I'm saying. In response to something changing and not thinking it should change because it wasn't. In response to something changing and not thinking it should change because it wasn't like that in the past. But I think that's reasonable though. Yeah, sorry, you didn't miss that much. I mean, the topic's kind of evolved a little bit. C4, I think that's I think in some cases it's reasonable, you know. I'm sure even you can find an example of the same thing I'm saying, but with a different topic that maybe you're more familiar with or more invested in, you know. Like, sure, so, something should not be stopped from changing just because it wasn't like that in the past. I agree. I'm just saying that the kickback that sometimes happens when something does change after remaining the same for so long, the kickback sometimes is reasonable, like the reaction. Well, I'm gonna eat something though. I haven't had anything. Yeah, sure, go for it. Grab some munchies. Like, yeah, I guess I'm just saying that the place where the sentiment comes from is a lot of the time can be quite reasonable, and of course there's going to be times where the sentiment is reasonable, but perhaps the restriction is unreasonable. Like perhaps the thing that is being critiqued is too strangling, you know. I can find an example, but using that as a reason is terrible. You would change it to try improve it, not because good old days, keep it that way. But the difference though is that the people who may not want it to be changed are saying that because they don't believe that the change is good. Like, they believe that the change would make the game take a step back, or would make the game lose something special. Right? So they're not actually just saying keep it the same just because nostalgia, or just because old days, keep it the way it used to be. I acknowledge that if somebody is saying it shouldn't change purely because of that, then yeah, that's not the greatest compelling argument. I think oftentimes when done within reason, the change is being asked to remain the same because they believe that implementing the change would make the game lose something that is special, or was that did bring a lot to the experience. Do you know what I mean? Show proof that the idea is bad then. Even then, why would you not test it to find out? It's just bad logic all around. I think it's only bad logic depending how far the person is going. If the person is like, oh, for example, with the damage numbers example I gave, if I said, oh, they put damage numbers in Monster Hunter World, I'm not playing this game ever, then I would agree with you. That would be me being unreasonable or just too extreme and kind of illogical. Like, I should at least give it a try because I never know, I might like it. And that's what happened. I bought the game and, 500 hours later, here I am still playing, So I acknowledge what you're saying, but there are cases where the proof that you're saying that people should show, like in the health bar example that I gave, I could argue how, it's not proof. I can't prove that it's going to be bad, but I can give plenty of logical arguments that support why perhaps adding health bars may not be the best path for this game. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that would side with me on that. It doesn't mean making health bars would make the game bad. But the argument would be, we feel that there is a high chance that the game may lose something special, like importantly special, if health bars were added, I don't think that's an illogical argument, but that's just a statement. What the reason behind it? Losing something special is very nebulous, no? Okay, for example, so just off the top of my head, if you add health bars to Monster Hunter, that's one less thing that separates it from the average third-person action game. Every other third-person action game in this kind of vein has health bars. Monster Hunter doesn't, and it's never had them because it's able to function without them. So that's something that would be special, that would now be not special because now it just has something that every other third-person action game has. Secondly, there is a... remember the game is called Monster Hunter, right? The idea is that they try to make you feel as much of a hunter as possible. And, if you were a hunter in real life and you were going out into the wilderness fighting beasts and stuff, you would only be able to tell if the monster is weak based on how they're behaving, where they're running to, are they calling for backup, are they moving a certain way, you know what I mean? And so there's a sense of not realism, what's the word I'm looking for? Immersion. There's a sense of immersion that you gain because there is no health bar, because you can't say, oh, he's got 20% left. Let's not let him escape. You know what I mean? And so without that, it creates something unique, and it forces you to kind of think about the game differently and engage with the game differently, right? So those are two things right there. Let me just try and think of a third one because 3 is a magic number. Let me think. Third one. Because the game has no health bars, it allows the developers to be more purposeful with how they design the monsters, right? So when you think about how they animate the monsters, like this monster does this when it's weak. When, for example, there's a monster called Anjanath, right? I know you don't play Monster Hunter, so I'm just giving you like specific examples. There's a monster called Anjanath, and when it gets angry, it like when you fight it normally, it can't shoot fire, or it doesn't really shoot fire. It just does like these kind of small spits of fire that don't go anywhere. But when it gets angry and charged up, it can actually breathe fire. But when you damage its neck enough when it's angry, the flame in its throat will explode, and then it will topple over, and then it goes into an animation. Oh, hey, good night, man. Thanks for coming through. It goes into an animation where you can get a lot of damage off on it, right? And I bring that up because perhaps if the game had health bars, the developers would just be like, okay, the players can see like when the health bar goes to this range, then this thing will trigger, and then the neck will explode, and then you can get more damage, right? And a developer would definitely do that, and then the players would be like, oh look, Anjanath is about to enter 60%. When he has 60%, this will happen, right? But the way the game is now, you can only know that based on like just looking at the monster and how it's behaving, or looking for, oh, his neck is red, attack the neck while you can so that we can make it explode. Does that make sense? Thanks, man. Yeah, enjoy. I'll try enjoy. Well, I'm enjoying the rest of my stream, so appreciate you coming by. So yeah, those are just 3 examples off the top of my head, which are actual tangible fair reasons why somebody would be apprehensive if in the next game they're like, hey guys, health bars now. Again, it doesn't mean the game would suddenly be bad. It just means that there are tangible things and concepts that the game may not be able to do as well with health bars. You know what I mean? And like, one thing I will say is that I acknowledge, like, I have a bit of a designer brain. Like, a lot of the time when I think of things, because I have a background in animation and I've designed my own card game before and I've released it out into the world, and I've seen people engage with a game that I've made, and I've seen people like it, I've seen people hate it, I've seen people think it sucks, I've seen kids play my game and like think it's the most boring thing in the world. So I constantly, I have a habit, to my own detriment sometimes, I have a habit of seeing things from the perspective of a designer. So that might be why I feel quite strongly about this topic as a whole. But yeah, I just say that to mention that, like, I definitely think very carefully about these things, you know. That doesn't make me right, it just makes me, I guess, quite invested or passionate about the topic. Okay, I hear the unique part of the argument. I would go down two lines of questioning from there. One, if health was an on option in the game to have, would you feel it's lost something special? Two, if the health bars were implemented, would you say Monster Hunter is just a cut-out copy of any other game in its genre? To answer the second one first, I wouldn't say it's a carbon copy, but I would say that the divide between it being special is lessened. So, that lessened is important to me. Like, I think there are a lot of games out there in this world, and there's very few games out there that are able to really separate itself from the rest and exist in its own ecosystem and be appreciated by so many, you know? So I think that, yeah, exactly, the guys, yeah, totally agree. So while I don't think the introduction of health bars would just make Monster Hunter a carbon copy of whatever other third-person action game, it would bring it closer, if that makes sense. And to answer the first one, personally, it's a tricky one, but personally, I think that, like, in the game now, you can turn off the damage numbers if you want. But most people who didn't like damage numbers at first leave it on because it's just too convenient and we've just gotten used to it. I think the same thing may happen if they introduce health bars. If they said, here guys, health bars are on by default, but you can turn it off. My concern is that because most people will play the game with the health bars on by default, they will engage with it and they will get used to it, and it will get to the point where, because now they've acclimatized to it, the concern about no health bars being special is irrelevant. It doesn't matter anymore because they've just gotten used to it, right? But it not mattering anymore because they've gotten used to it doesn't mean that health bars are now better. It just means that we've gotten used to it. You could still say that technically this introduction of the health bar, it actually has removed an element of uniqueness from the game, but everyone's used to it now, so we just move on. I think that's what would actually end up happening, and I wouldn't want that to happen, because I think that what will now happen is that there's a higher chance that the developers will create monsters or create experiences that are not as well thought out because they now have health bars. Do you know what I mean? Damage numbers show your damage increase, let you actually test and see benefits of your decos. Before a world, I was barely interested in build crafting. Yeah, that's a good point. So that's what I'm saying. Like, damage numbers was an example of something I ended up being wrong about. Like, I saw the trailer, I'm like, I'm not sure about damage numbers. I hadn't played the game yet, still wasn't sure about damage numbers. I played the game and I'm like, holy shit, damage numbers are actually great for the reasons that you just communicated. So that's an example of uniqueness and spirit of the game that I ended up being wrong about. But I think health bars, while I could also end up being wrong about health bars, I think there's a lot more argumentation, or there's a lot more arguments you can make to say why health bars are actually bad. And one of the key arguments I would make personally is that I truly believe that if the developers now make monsters with health bars in mind, there's less of a reason there's less reason for the developers to make the monsters as interesting in terms of how they move and how you actually engage with the combat. I think there's a risk that would happen. Adding a monster health bar would be controversial but also worrisome. Like in MMORPGs, you only look at the number and not enjoy the game at some point. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I totally agree. Doesn't that prove people don't know what they like? Why would people do something they don't like when you can toggle it off? Why would people do something they don't like when you could toggle it off? Being climatized to a situation you don't need, be in, or like makes zero sense to me. That you don't need to be in or like. Doesn't that prove people don't know what they like? I mean, okay, first, that is true. A lot of the time people don't know what they like. People don't know what they want. Why would people do something they don't like when you can toggle it off? Because I think that... I don't think I'm smart enough to put this into words, but what I'm trying to say is that the person initially thought they didn't like it, or they didn't like it initially, but then they played it and then they realized it's actually not that bad. That's what I'm saying, in terms of the damage numbers. People usually do something, in most cases, what is beneficial. People can turn the damage numbers off. Did that as well as in the beginning. Yeah. Doing something you don't like when you can toggle it, when you can toggle the health bars is what I meant. But I think it's some, you know what it's kind of like, you know, okay, maybe this is a bad argument, but I'm thinking if this, I don't think this is a bad argument actually. You know what this conversation reminds me of? It reminds me of AI, right? It reminds me of ChatGPT. It's about the convenience. We might not like the fact that something that we could do ourselves or research ourselves can just be done with ChatGPT, but the convenience offered with it oftentimes is too important to ignore. It's too beneficial to ignore. So why would you gimp yourself by not using it, even though you can acknowledge somewhere in your mind that I kind of don't like that we can just do this? Like, sure, it's useful, but I'm now finding myself using it when 5 years ago I would have just done this myself. Like there's been times where, like, for example, I had a private English class and the parent wanted me to basically help their child become a bit more conversational and be able to like have storytelling skills, right? And so in the past, before ChatGPT, I'm like really creative when it comes to like games and activities for kids, right? In the past, I would have just come up with my own list, like, okay, let me come up with 5-6 games, and this is the point of this game. This game is to practice this skill. This game is to get them thinking about this. I would come up with my own list. And then with the advent of ChatGPT, I went into ChatGPT and I'm like, can you do this for me? And it does it. You know what I mean? So like, it's about the convenience. Sometimes the convenience is so convenient that to now ignore it and purposely not do it is quite difficult. And I think it's similar with the health bars. I'm pretty logic bro brain. ChatGPT is a massive pro to me in almost all cases. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm saying that the reason why I bring up this as an example is that a person might acknowledge deep down that the more I use ChatGPT to do things that I'm capable of doing on my own, this might not be good for me in the long run, like my own personal growth as a person and my intelligence and what I'm able to do on my own. But the convenience and the speed at which ChatGPT can complete this task is too important to ignore. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's the same with the health bar. Okay, I can see the health bar now. Now I don't need to worry about monster tells. Now I don't need to worry about like, how much percent they got left. I don't, in practice, or the nature of this, the nature of me not needing to worry about this, I kind of don't like that. But the convenience may be too valuable to turn off. That's for me personally. There are some people that don't like it so much that they will just turn it off. But there will be a lot of people where it's like, I really wish that they didn't have to add the health bars, because it's changed the game so much. But it's hard to go back now because like it's just so convenient. I don't think that's a contradiction or a bad thing to say. When did we fall back to spirit of the game? I thought we were talking about monster health bar. Yeah. You tell me. The spirit of the game is not my position. I'm trying to show it's super flimsy to use. Yeah, but I'm spirit of the game is just a title, right? Maybe I should not say that term, but I'm only using spirit of the game as a title, and my reasonings under the title is what should be considered. So maybe like don't just think spirit of the game. I've already provided why I'm using that term or what that term means to me. You know what I mean? A spirit of the game is just an umbrella term. Everything that comes under is the real meat and potatoes of what should be addressed. Yeah, people can use it poorly, I agree. It's like when people say Twitter is a bad platform. Platforms are neutral. It's the people that use it that make them bad. Sure. I don't know if this is a complete one-for-one comparison though, but I don't disagree with the platforms themselves being neutral. But I don't think this should be too disagreeable though. I think we're just saying, or I'm just saying that it's possible to add something that removes that makes a game less special in a way that does matter. It doesn't mean the game is terrible now. It just means that the game is lacking something. And perhaps when you play the game for like a year, after a certain amount of time, that thing that is now lacking kind of falls to the wayside because you're now so used to it and you've become accustomed to it. But I think becoming accustomed to something doesn't always mean that the thing you have become accustomed to is better than what it was before. It just means you've become accustomed to it. And maybe that's all that matters. If you become accustomed to it, then nothing else matters, right? Because maybe you're still playing the game, so who cares? Maybe that's an argument to make. But I just don't think becoming accustomed to something means that everything is fine, if that makes sense. Okay, I would say anything under the umbrella of spirit of the game is not a strong defense. So the 3 examples that I gave earlier, you wouldn't say that any of them are decent defenses? I mean, I think they are, but maybe that's just like a line in the sand where we just won't agree on that based on just our fundamental disagreement. But I think they were pretty solid defenses, or solid arguments. Boom. Boom, 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 boom. To me, the spirit of the game is what the game always had. For Monster Hunter, it is hunting big monsters, collecting and making smart use of your items, slowly learning where to find how something works without having everything explained and pre-chewed. Keeping the environment and monsters somewhat realistic while trying to go for the feeling like you are actually hunting. Yeah. I will never become accustomed to eating shit sandwiches when I have jam in the fridge, is my crude analogy. I get your reasoning, but I think it's subjective nostalgia because you said, well, if it changes, people will probably just go with it. Yeah, but my point is that people just going with it doesn't mean that the thing they are now going with is a superior option or is better. It just means they're going with it. Like, does that make sense? Right? Like that cannot be that cannot be disagreeable, right? Like, just going with it doesn't mean that what they're just going with is actually better than what it was before. It just means they're just going with it because maybe they enjoy other aspects of the game, or maybe they just want to play the game. Like, the ways in which it's changed hasn't turned them off so much to the point where they now don't want to play the game, right? Like, there's no way that should be disagreeable. La, 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 To me, it sounds like we are getting philosophical. Yes, we are, and I love philosophy. So where and when we meet up at a bar or tables, get some drinks, because that's when I am actually enjoying philosophical talk. Well, you can always, grab yourself a beer where you are, if you're using your PC or your phone, grab yourself a beer. You can recreate the environment of a bar, philosophical bar talk. I'm not saying people don't do what you're saying. I'm saying, why choose to do something that's worse when you don't have to? That's what I mean. But again, there can be other aspects of the game that the person enjoys. The health bars is just it's just one aspect of the game. There's still maybe the story, the weapons, the way the game feels, the design of the monsters, the music. There's a myriad of other things that the player, or other reasons why the player may continue to play the game, even if the game made a huge change, such as adding health bars, and perhaps that change is something that they fundamentally disagree with. But like, one fundamental disagreement might not be enough for them to drop or not play the game when there's like 6 other reasons why they love the franchise or love the game, That's what I'm saying. Like, if there was a new Monster Hunter game and they did add health bars, it is possible that I would actually play that game, right? But me playing the game is not necessarily a cosign of the health bar addition. I could just be enjoying other aspects of the game, and perhaps those aspects help me like deal with the fact that this other area is an area that I don't like. Which we do all the time. Like, people play games and those games have glaring aspects that they don't like, right? I'm sure you can think of loads of fighting games that you enjoy, but there's aspects of the game that you don't enjoy, but you still continue to play the game. It's no different than that. Okay then, the spirit umbrella argument never truly mattered to me. If it matters so much, you would just toggle off damage numbers. But my response to that is that, like, well, the damage numbers example is different, because I acknowledge that the damage numbers is actually something that I end up liking now. Like, now I can't go back. Does that make sense? Like, now, like, I thought damage numbers would be horrible. They turned out to not be horrible, and they turned out, like Legaizo said earlier, with the damage numbers, you're able to, like, making builds and squeezing out every last bit of damage is now possible because of damage numbers, which is something that I never even thought about in the old games. So damage numbers is different because I now love damage numbers. Right? That's why I don't toggle it off, because I want the damage numbers on. I see the issue. I'm talking about the option to keep the spirit you're talking about. Taking what you're given and adapting, I think. Yeah. So like the health bars. Okay, so here's what it is. I thought damage numbers went against the spirit of the game. Let's just keep using spirit of the game as the umbrella term. I thought damage numbers went against the spirit of the game. I turned out to be wrong. Turns out Monster Hunter can still exist as Monster Hunter with damage numbers, despite this being the game that introduced them to the franchise, right? So I turned out to be wrong about Monster Hunter and damage numbers. But I don't think I would be wrong with health bars. I could be wrong, but I have more ammunition, more reasons to believe that health bars would be way more likely to not be good for the game. But and even if it isn't good for the game, I acknowledge that there is a chance that I might leave the option on because I probably will just get used to it. Or it will just be so convenient to leave on that it would be detrimental to other aspects of the game to leave off. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. Wheel! I understand better now. My bad. It's hard keeping up. Yeah. It's typing against somebody that can talk is as somebody that's done that in many stream chats myself, I know the struggle. But yeah, no, it's I'm glad you see where I'm coming from. But as always, I appreciate the brain testing, you know. I mean, like, not that you're testing my brain, but I think it's important to be able to vocalize what one feels about something, you know. Sometimes it's hard, but it's a good skill to have. That's my teacher brain, my teacher side coming out. Dude, I've been on dates with girls who like, this is something I need to like, I don't do it as much, I don't think, but I've been on dates with girls who, when we get into certain conversations, we sometimes I'll speak in a way that makes the person feel like they're now in a classroom, or now I've activated my teacher mode. And for some girls, I guess it's, I don't know, maybe it's been a turn on, or it's been something that they've actually like think is cool. But I've definitely been on dates with girls where they didn't like that. And it was something that I was not conscious of, but actually I guess a little bit conscious of, you know, like I didn't want to fall into a trap where I'm doing that too much. So you're saying, oh, wait, did we cap? Oh yeah. So you're saying you was wrong about the damage. So you're saying that the damage number turned out to not be the spirit of the game. Yes, I guess you could say that. Or yeah, I mean, keep in mind when we say spirit of the game, it's not like there is one thing that is the spirit of any game. There are multiple things that creates the vibe and creates the specialness or the uniqueness that makes that game special. So I would never say that, oh, what is the spirit of Monster Hunter? It's damage numbers. Without damage numbers, Monster Hunter is not, or with damage numbers, Monster Hunter is no longer Monster Hunter. I would never say that. But I will say that I will acknowledge that me thinking that having damage numbers would go against one of the core aspects of Monster Hunter turned out to be incorrect.